Marika and Howard Stone completed successful careers in publishing and public relations in the late 1990s. Rather than retire, they decided to start new careers and started TooYoungToRetire.com. The website started out advocating a new vision of later life. It expanded from there into a training course for coaches, social workers, and career counselors. More than 125 of the Stones graduates teach their course in 30 states around the U.S. and abroad. The Stones have published a book about their work and do a good deal of public speaking about their vision for an ageless society. In 2007, they were named Purpose Prize Fellows by Civic Ventures, a program that recognizes role models for engaged retirement. I spoke with Howard and Marika recently about their desire to retire, the concept of retirement, how they develop their ideas, and the psychological changes people face as they reorient their plans for later life.
A burning desire to see retirement in museums and history books, and that people won't have this deadline in their lives that says you're done, and they won't feel that they're done, and they could play golf when they're 35, or they could play golf when they're 75, or they could go on trips when they're 14 or when they're 64, and all the things that people think they have to wait for they can have in their lives. And that work is the medicine for longevity and fulfillment.
Retirement is really a fairly recent concept in the grand sweep of things, right?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, in this country it was sort of formalized with the Social Security Act, established in 1935. And I think, you know, that the whole idea then was, first of all, people weren't living that long, so, you know, to give them a few years with some sort of, I don't even know if it really supported their lives in those years, but it was certainly something to enable to keep them from poverty, let's say. And I mean, it's just completely out of sync with lives being so much longer now, and of course the payout, you know, is not enough to sustain most people's lives anyway now. So it's, the concept of it is just very outdated, because, you know, it hasn't changed with the reality of today.
And partly there are organizations who want to continue with the same conditioning that if you have enough money, you can have this endless vacation. So that conditioning, that hypnosis, actually makes people feel that they'll be happy with nothing really significant to do. And just the opposite is true from a medical point of view, and just the opposite is true from the new voices that are coming in and saying that society really needs mature people and older people to be engaged for us to have a rosy future for our kids and grandkids. We are needed in every part of society. We had this place in Southern California that was a kind of a getaway for us, and we thought, gee, this would be a beautiful place to retire because there are mountains and the air is dry, and it's the desert, and it's gorgeous, and we could play tennis and hike. And in having the experience with our neighbors and other people that were going to stores and going to restaurants and going to and shopping, I just noticed there was something missing in the things that they said and the way they looked. And I realized that they really didn't have anything going on other than just living out their lives. I thought it was like, you know, these vertical tombstones, you know, like you're walking around, and it scared me. So at the time I started to strategize. I was being coached on what I wanted to do next. And I had a 2-year plan to overlap learning the coaching and moving out of what I was doing. So the idea of Too Young to Retire kind of, or calling it Too Young to Retire, kind of emerged from my mind and the mind of the coaches, and decided to do a website with that name.
Oddly enough, you know, we sort of had these parallel, and I think this is happening with a lot of people, we had these parallel ideas. You know, we were like really on the fence. First of all, we were thinking we would do traditional retirement. That's why we bought this beautiful place. I was only 49 when we bought it. You know, it was like, someday, you know, we're going to have this great place to go to. And the other part of it was I was making plans. You know, it wasn't as if I thought, well, I'm getting kind of burned out with the business that I have. I have public relations and consultancy and doing some travel to a client down in Tennessee, quite a bit of that. And I was feeling a little burned out. I'd had my own business for about 11 or 12 years. And so I was thinking, I had this idea that there was something next. So that there's these two conflicting ideas. One was the retirement represented by the place that we bought. And the other thing was this, something was coming up saying, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do something else.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's less of a push of climbing the ladder because you're saying, now what is, because you're looking around and saying, okay, so achievement is kind of okay because that was ego driven. And now my ego sort of shifting to not struggling to be somebody that I don't care about that identity so much anymore. I think a good example or a good contrast would be, so on this side you have surgeons who've been putting in these extraordinary hours for a couple of decades at least, or 20, 30 years, and the surgeons not only are physically not being able to do what they want to do, but they just can't, they don't want that pace anymore. So they're being pushed by that. And on the other hand, you have teachers who love it so much that they're still wearing their tweeds in universities and they're 80 years old, and they just want to stay there.
Yeah.
And maybe they're taking more time to go to the beach or go fishing, or maybe not.
Yeah.
Well, the men that come to me are usually very narrow in their experiences. So it's been, you know, their identity has been with their work, and they don't know what else they're made of, and they don't know what else they're capable of. So it's kind of like a broad-based examination of what do you value, and nobody's ever asked them, oh, what are your values? And nobody's ever asked them, what do you see as a balanced lifestyle? So these are brand new questions, and before we get to that, we get to some really simple games like what are you putting up with in your life that you'd like to not put up with anymore. So they get to see that they can make some progress.
I think for a lot of women in this time of life, you know, this came up actually in one of the discussions. You know, I think we've really done the heavy lifting as regards caregiving, and I think we still do that because typically, you know, even when we're done doing the lion's share of raising children, which, you know, I think generally falls on our shoulders, and you know, also many of us also working. Then there's the you know, then you've got elders sometimes, and usually women tend to pick up those burdens as well. So I think sometimes they reach this phase of life feeling pretty exhausted, you know, from this kind of level of caregiving. And I think sometimes they really need to be sort of opened up to realize that they've got other roles to play.
Well, look, I have a tee-off time, and
gotta be on the beach by then.